did the same thing. Oh. Good morning.
Good morning.
I always forget. This is what happens when I turn on my video. So I'm going to switch computers. I know it's such a pain in the tuchus. How are you today?
It's so nice to meet you finally.
I know. Hopefully I'll get to show you my face here in a minute.
Fingers crossed. Are you going to have my presentation or should I show it?
I will give you hosting privileges so you can do it.
Okay.
So you can be the boss and have the reins, my friend.
Great. That means I need to pull it up on my
Oh boy.
Are you in Tennessee or is it?
I am.
Pardon?
I am in Tennessee.
Okay, I thought so. I was like, I know you're close to me. You're not in Virginia, but you're close.
Where are you at in Virginia?
Richmond.
Okay. I can't remember how far away that is, but it's not.
So we're pretty central.
Yeah.
So like to get to the Tennessee border is like 6 hours drive.
Okay. Further than I thought.
It's not terrible. It's not
No,
great.
it's not. I can't remember how far DC is from us, but I usually travel. Well, did travel before all this crazy pandemic stuff to go to Mom Congress.
I've never been. I really want to go.
It's a great experience. But I will be honest, I've enjoyed it being virtual, so I didn't have to go to DC.
Yeah.
And they keep talking about it next year being in DC, and I'm like, oh, you still need to have a virtual option.
Yeah, let's just keep it flexible for everybody, just because it's easier.
It is different when it's virtual, but
yeah, but it doesn't mean it's bad, and it's good for other people to be able to join no matter where they're at.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm gonna join. I'm gonna go on mute for Quicket. Lord.
You're good. I'm trying to track down my presentation because I know I submitted it to you.
Probably download it back to you, or present if you need us to, whichever.
Well, I try to keep everything in my Google Drive. Excuse me. So I know it's somewhere. It's just a question of where.
Well, if it looks anything like my Google Drive, Lord have mercy.
Oh, you know where it is? I know where it is because I used Canva to make this one.
Oh, yeah.
That's what happened. Yeah.
Recording in progress. Now, hopefully there's something. Okay. There we go.
Great. You are not the only person who has that challenge. I have another course that I'm in, and every day she has to have the 2 screens set up because she has a similar issue.
Yeah.
How many people subscribed for today? Do you know?
It is hard to know. Hello.
Is the mic still on? Yeah. Is the mic on for the other one? There we go. Now.
What was I going to say? Oh, it It's very hard for us to know who's going to show up live. And I'm considering we may stream on the regular Facebook page because I think we get more traffic that way. And then share it into the group. And I even think for future, because we have one more from our normal advertising earlier this year, the next couple weeks. And I think after that, we may just move it to the page. Because there's just not a lot of interaction during, especially in the group, because I think people watch the replays and we put them on YouTube. So yeah, I think we may just move it to the page and share and try to keep interaction going. I think that's going to be the best route.
Okay. So you're not expecting a lot of interaction during?
Most likely not.
Okay.
We haven't streamed to our page except for one other time. So we may get more interaction there, but we'll be watching both in the group and on the page. Okay. I've got my intern over here.
What's their name?
Heather.
Nice to meet you, Heather.
Here, let's see. Oh, it's gonna blur around.
So you have an actual office. I'm so jealous.
I do. I do. It's a way for me to keep all the crap for Cherish Mom out of my house.
Yes, I hear that. So I am literally in a corner of my bedroom. This is my office. And so it's a lot to juggle sometimes.
I'm sure. No doubt. I'm sure. Oh. Here was what happened to me last time.
I'm just going to troubleshoot my chair for a second because my other arm of it broke off during my second to last appointment.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. I started laughing hysterically. It was very bad timing.
Here. This is crazy.
Yeah, I don't think I have the right tool to remove that quickly enough. So I'll just deal with it.
I just got to pull up your bio.
Pardon?
I'm just going to pull up your bio real quick and then
Okay.
I'll start get the stream set up. Now, when I read your bio, do you want me to say R Featherstone or
just call me Featherstone?
Featherstone, okay. And do you want me to say Featherstone who goes by they, them, or because that's in parentheses?
You can just skip over my pronouns. It's not really important.
Well, it is, but
I mean, it's not important in the context of me giving a presentation. It's more like if you refer to me by they, them, I will appreciate it rather than yeah, it's always tricky. And I have a lot of people call me R Featherstone, which always kind of makes me giggle because it sounds like our. It sounds like a possessive pronoun. So it feels very welcoming.
That is a good point.
It's just a funny, like, I don't know how else to
I didn't think about that, but that's kind of cute.
It was so funny because it's Maternal Mental Health Month. So I did another webinar a couple days ago with Robin, like we are Robin, the like
awesome.
maternal. Yeah, and it was funny because they introduced me as our Featherstone, and it sounded so much like our Featherstone that I almost started laughing at the moment. Don't be unprofessional.
All right. Got that. And now,
Whenever you want to enable screen sharing, I can get my stuff set up.
oh yeah. Let me see.
And I don't remember if there was an exact time goal for this.
It's between, like, the presentation piece is anywhere from 30, 45 minutes. If it's less than that, that's completely fine. Why can't I add you as a, oh, I bet it's because I am. Oh, there we go. There we go. No, to the wrong one.
It's okay. The great thing about it is we got the time to figure it out.
There we go.
Awesome.
Which, I don't know which me is hosting right this minute.
Well, can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
Great. Okay.
Now,
Can you see both the presentation and me now? Is that
yes.
what? Okay,
Yes.
good. Great. My name's R. Featherstone. I don't know how you want to lead into this. How do you?
Oh, I gotta get in live first.
Okay.
I am not. Where are my options here? Oh. Okay. That's because I'm over here. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Is it okay if I grab some water real fast?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Sorry, I'm doing a presentation. I think it's not going to make it to school. I mean, I can take you after the presentation.
Okay.
I'm going back to work, buddy. I'll talk to you after. Any luck?
Yep. We are ready.
Great.
All right, we're gonna go live, and then I'll do your introduction by reading your bio, and
Thank you.
then we'll get to it.
Great.
Here we go. All right, we are here. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our Digging Deeper presentation. We're so excited to have you here. We're gonna, awesome, thank you. Sorry, someone just came to deliver mail. You too. Welcome. We're so excited to have Featherstone here with us today to talk about food and parenting, a very important topic, especially as new mamas and, you know, doing all the things that we do. And I just want to introduce Featherstone really quickly, and then she'll just jump right in and get to it. Featherstone has had a colorful career in healthcare, which began in 2005 in emergency services. They have since had experiences spanning labor and delivery, behavioral health, sexual health, eating disorders, and psychedelic medicine. After starting their graduate training as a nurse midwife, they then pivoted to becoming a nurse practitioner in sexual and reproductive health. 2 years later, they completed a program in psychiatry, so they would be able to offer as wide a variety of tools as possible to support the mental health of their parents, from medication to talk therapy. Featherstone's lived experience with mental health challenges related to birth and postpartum, as well as eating disorders and membership in the LGBTQ+ community, informed their practice. Eucalyptus Health is their practice, telehealth practice in Idaho, which they started after COVID began. They serve as the organizer for the local perinatal mental health coalition and are active with many professional organizations involved with parents, mental health, and sexuality. Welcome, Featherstone. Thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful for you. And just a side note, I had no idea you started in emergency services. I did as well. So that is amazing.
I think I remember reading that. And I was like, yeah, I was an EMT too back in the day.
Amazing. I had no idea. I absolutely loved being an EMT. It was amazing, yet sometimes challenging, but very rewarding as well.
I used to joke that it was the best of times and the worst of times.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about that again sometime. Awesome. Well, I'm going to let you take it over. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here today and to talk about food and parenting, because I feel like in the midst of feeding new babies, we often forget about feeding parents. And so I'm really, really happy to talk about the ways that we can just keep an eye out for issues and also sort of address them early on. Where we're going to start today is with food and eating disorder myths, because it takes just a little bit of education for us to understand where our blind spots are, because culturally, the messaging that we get about food and the messaging that we get about disordered eating is not always correct. And so talking about it in just a really compassionate and open way is really, really helpful for a lot of folks. We'll also touch on body image after infertility or pregnancy, because both of these can have a big impact on how we feel about our bodies. If we're either not able to become pregnant easily, or if we weren't really expecting how our body would look after we had a baby. There's a lot of sense of, you know, if our body didn't do what we thought it would do, and that's really hard. How we feed baby in the early days is something that ends up being really challenging. Infant feeding is a big concern for new parents. And then as children move on to more solids and food, talking about feeding our children and feeding ourselves. So I'm going to start with myth busting. I always feel like that's a great place to start. Eating disorders are not black and white. And so when I talk about disordered eating, what I mean is when our relationship with food or our bodies or even exercise is not as healthy as it could be. And this can look like lots of dieting, lots of extreme changes in eating habits, like going from a lot of restricting and a lot of like really small meal sizes to sort of losing self-control and moving towards eating so much that like we're uncomfortable or we feel bad about it. And so I like to tell people that it's more of a spectrum than a dichotomy. It's not I have an eating disorder or I don't. It's more of how am I feeling about my relationship with food and my body and exercise and moderation and all of the above overall? And this is a thing that's really dynamic. It's not like once you have that healthy relationship with your body and nutrition that it will always be that way, or vice versa. Just because we struggle with food and how we feel about our bodies doesn't mean that it will always be that way. I think in the common view of the media, there's sort of anorexia nervosa is very commonly recognized as the most popular eating disorder that's recognized. And then, we have an idea of someone who's very, very thin. It's like visibly recognizable. They don't want to eat, they exercise a lot. But the truth is, lots of people have eating disorders and you can't look at them and tell. And so we can never assume someone's health status or their relationship with food or exercise just by looking at them. It's much more nuanced, and there's a big psychological component. Eating disorders aren't just something that you pick up in college, and it's not something that you just pick up from sports. There's a lot of components that go into it. There's a lot of genetics related especially to our mental health, as well as the culture we were raised in. And it's very multifactorial. It's psychological as well as physical. I wanted to pull some body images because it's really important when the media promotes one specific ideal of what is beautiful. And motherhood is no different. We see very thin women with very prominent baby bumps who look very happy. And it's just, there's no one right way to be pregnant, and there's no one way to have a baby. And we know that, like, in our logical brains, but when it's what we see in the media over and over and we don't match that, it's very difficult to sort of reconcile that if we have any sort of difficulty with body image. And so where this is especially difficult with infertility is that we can't have infertility usually without having some sort of disappointment tied to our body, because our body isn't doing this thing that we were hoping and expecting it to be able to do. And so reconciling the disappointment and our body not doing something that a lot of us think, should be easy, there we go, shoulding ourselves. I talk with my patients a lot about that because I focus on a lot of perinatal clients, and a lot of mental health is examining our expectations. And so if the media has set us up with an unrealistic expectation of what our body will look like or what our body will do in terms of pregnancy, or what it looks like after we've had a baby, there's not a lot of media portrayal of what a person looks like after they've had a baby, like right after they've had a baby or in that first year. And so I love, love, love the fourth trimester project. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the fourth trimester project, it's a lot of really raw, candid, unfiltered images of people's bodies after having a baby, especially with the baby in the picture, because it helps us keep in mind, like, yes, my body looks different, but the outcome was this beautiful baby. I was able to grow my family and add this person to love and care for and watch them grow and change, with the rest of my family. And so it's a trade-off, but it's absolutely worth it. And so we have to talk about, body image as a whole concept is not just how does my body look, but really underneath that is, what is my body letting me do? Because we couldn't do all of the things in our life that give us joy if we didn't have our body. Many of the things that give us pleasure, like eating delicious food, going for a walk on a beautiful sunny day, throwing our children in the air, growing our children in our bodies, feeding our children with our bodies, snuggling our children, being able to give them comfort when they're hurt. all of those things that we wouldn't be able to do if we didn't have our bodies. And so a lot of the root of eating disorders and relationships with food that are really difficult is that there's a lot of like punishing and controlling bodies that happens. And I really want people to examine if they ever feel like they're having thoughts like, oh, I don't need to have that cake. Is it that you feel like you don't deserve it? Is it feel like, I don't want to gain weight? Is it avoidance of that? Or is it actually I'm full? Actually, I don't want the cake. But if I want people to really tune into what their bodies are telling them, and that's where the intuitive eating movement comes in, is that we have to honor that our body knows if we need or don't need more food. And we get to decide what else we need to add in order to have balance, because ultimately the goal is balance. And that's what we want to model for our children as they grow up, is not that we need to be punished or we need to be restricted. Diet culture is generally overall very harmful, as popular as it is. People who've engaged in diets are at a much higher risk of an eating disorder just by virtue of trying to have such rigid control over what they eat. There was a really interesting article that Chris Rains and I recently touched on in our mentoring group of other perinatal mental health providers, where we talked about like the top 3 biggest things that moms in particular worry about after having a baby. And the most prominent that I think is relevant here is that feeding the baby. If we're breastfeeding, bottle feeding, pumping, troubleshooting a lip tie, tongue tie, all of those things lead into us hyper focusing on baby's weight and growth and development. And what we sometimes miss in terms of, the forest and the trees is that all of this is food focused. Yes, it's related to baby. Yes, we're doing good jobs as parents by monitoring and making sure they get what they need. But what we don't always recognize is in the background of our minds is that we are becoming preoccupied with food. And for those of us who've had a lot of, intense social media, consumption related to dieting or bodies or exercise to look a certain way, we might not really recognize at first or for a long time that we're becoming preoccupied with food again. And just because parenthood in general, early parenthood is chaotic. There is no predictability. We don't know when baby's going to sleep or be awake. Sometimes even it starts in pregnancy. We don't feel comfortable. It's difficult for us to sleep in a certain position. Maybe we need to move to a recliner in the living room. Or we have to sleep in a different bed or on the couch to be able to get those last few hours. The chaos of early parenting really disrupts a healthy, reliable eating pattern. And so any sensitivity that we might have to skipping meals, or I have a lot of people talk about grazing. The issue with grazing is sometimes that we don't recognize that we're missing whole meals. If we're not sitting down and having regular meals and we're just having little snacks here and there, it can be really easy to miss out on enough protein or enough carbohydrates to make sure that we're getting enough to keep going and sustain ourselves for this really difficult early phase of parenting with a new baby. So really a lot of this is reflecting on what we went through with our families of origin and the messaging that we got about food and our bodies. Because it's really good to focus on baby, but we've got to be sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well. And Christina, I'm sure you can chime in at any time about how that is a common theme, that we don't just take care of baby, we have to take care of mom as well.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. And that's where I get to this later section, because I think this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. When we get back to having a little bit more of a routine, a little bit more of a schedule, we get really, really focused on, well, what's the right way to start food with our babies? And again, it can become really preoccupying because there's the very basic part of it that's like, I want my baby to try new foods. I don't want them to choke. I don't want them to have bad experiences. But I see a lot of moms in my practice who are like, well, it has to be the perfect food. Like, what's the right food for my baby to be trying? And then they start worrying about like food sensitivities and potential like allergens. And there can be a lot of like, well, I want to avoid this and I want to include this. And it can be really overwhelming for parents. And lots of pediatricians don't always give a whole lot of guidance about this. And so when we don't get a lot of direction from our pediatricians, where do we go? We go to the internet. And the issue with Dr. Google, and I talk about Dr. Google pretty often because I feel like it's so natural to go and look for resources, but we really have to be careful who we take information from, because lots of people can throw up articles on the internet and they're not necessarily experts in their field. They might just be people who are really passionate, but that's different from someone who's done a lot of research or someone who's educated in it. So it's important to make sure that you're taking in information from reputable sources and reaching out to dietitians if you are concerned about food and your children and their feeding. Because I know a lot of moms struggle as babies are starting to eat because there's separate food that babies are eating a lot of times. You know, if they're eating jarred food, if they're nursing, if they're doing some like limited mashed table food. And it's good to put in a lot of thought to that because you do want your children to be meeting their nutritional needs. But the difference is when you might be too tired at the end of the day to cook a separate meal. So you might skip eating something nutritious for yourself, or you just have a snack of something that was left over. I used to have a running joke in my friend group about something called a caregiver meal. And the caregiver meal was when the parent would eat whatever the kid left behind on the plate. I feel like a lot of us can relate to that, but that's not always the best way to sustain ourselves. It does take effort to have meal planning and preparation and healthy, well-rounded, balanced meals. And a lot of times we are running after these really active children and even older children. So we're being pulled in multiple directions, and it's really easy to get pulled away from that routine that helps us take care of ourselves. And so if anybody listens to this, like, I want my number one overarching message to be, you still have to take care of yourself. Be cognizant of how you're thinking about food, both for you and the other ones in your family. And meal planning, I have it right here in my presentation. It's so, so important, just because parenthood and motherhood includes so many like moving targets. You know, we're adjusting schedules, we're looking at childcare, maybe we're working outside of the home, maybe we're helping support our partner or spouse in their career endeavors as we work from home. It's just a lot of juggling. And if we're not giving ourselves enough fuel, it's so, so hard to feel peaceful and to be calm and relaxed and happy if our body is missing out on what it needs. And so I feel like a lot of us are really susceptible to that. Christina, I would love to hear some of your feedback and if any of this resonated with you, just because I know these are really common things, but we don't always talk about them a lot.
Certainly we do not. And I think this is incredibly important as, you know, parenting and motherhood goes, because we're busy people. And so often, and we should ourselves all the time. We should be doing that. We shouldn't be doing that. And I know for me, I lost a lot of weight after my second child and got down to probably my goal weight. And then my crisis happened. And with all the medications and the way that it made me eat, like I gained it all back plus some and haven't lost it since. So I think this is an incredibly important discussion, especially when it comes to maternal health, maternal mental health, and the medications that we're using to help with that and how that affects everything too. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate everything you've shared.
You make me want to share a little bit more about how losing weight is a lot of times the goal after we have baby, because so many of us are like, yeah, I gained all this weight, but I'm okay with it because it was to grow the baby. And then there's this unrealistic pressure to drop the pounds as fast as we can. And if we have that history in our past of dieting, or cutting down to smaller portion sizes, or being like, oh, I had some chocolate cake, maybe I need to go hit the gym again. If we have those thoughts in the back of our head that we don't even recognize are potentially problematic, it can be externally reinforced. So when I say externally reinforced, I say you run into someone at the grocery store and you're 3 months postpartum and they're like, oh my God, you don't even look like you had a baby. And it's like, there's praise for the rapid weight loss. But rapid weight loss and the brain not being able to tell the difference between scarcity of food and a diet means that usually our anxiety and our mental health are going to be exacerbated by dramatic and fast weight loss. A malnourished brain is not a happy, calm brain, because we talk in psychiatry about like the different parts of the brain. And so the front of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, is involved in like higher reasoning and logic and the things that really sort of separate humans from animals. And the brainstem is more of like your automatic nervous system responses, taking care of the basics, like making sure that you're breathing and your heart is beating and sensing danger. And so our brain can't tell the difference between a diet and starvation. And so there's like an automatic sort of panic that engages, and we can't be happy and we can't be calm. And so things like postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression are so exacerbated when there is dieting and purposeful like decrease of what we're eating, or too much exercise for what we're eating, and there's not good overall balance, because that's so important. Oh, we've got a message in the chat.
That's for me. I was just going to say,
Okay.
I think that, the rapid weight loss or even maybe it's not so rapid, but it could be a red flag that someone is struggling. And maybe we should dig deeper into that and ask more questions.
So I think it's really, really common for us to go, oh my God, you look incredible. What have you done? And people don't even recognize before it's come out of their mouth that it's just that someone has lost weight. It's so ingrained in us, and it's so problematic because weight loss can be a sign of all kinds of health problems. If we're having digestive issues, if we're having absorption issues, if our thyroid is out of whack, lots of things that can cause depression or anxiety symptoms, or even psychosis. Lots of people don't know that the thyroid can be low or high, and high thyroid can be confused with postpartum psychosis. And it can also cause really rapid weight loss. So people get really anxious and they have lots of energy and they're like losing weight and they're struggling to relax enough to eat, and their metabolism is just going so high. And so that is a thing that we generally tend to try to rule out when we see someone with really profound postpartum anxiety, is not only like, are you making sure to eat enough, but how we draw labs to check thyroid, because there are other things that can cause maternal mental health issues. But we have to rule out the medical causes to make sure that we're targeting the right treatments. And I'm sure you've seen some patients like that before, where they've had medical issues complicating their mental health in postpartum, Christina.
Yeah, and just something you just said made me think back to my own experience and never really relating the weight loss to psychosis. And wow, I'm just sitting here like, huh. And how important that is, because I've always realized after the fact, and the medications I got put on not helped, but made me gain weight back, but never thought of the period before of that weight loss and how it could have contributed.
Absolutely. So postpartum psychosis doesn't always start with the flip of a switch. Like, it's not always like someone wakes up one day and they're bad. A lot of times there's something called a prodrome where symptoms sort of start and they're not dramatic enough for us to notice the direction we're moving in until it's progressed to a certain point. And I've had patients in the past where their postpartum psychosis, even though this is rare, it started as extreme anxiety, almost looking like a sort of OCD, like the racing concerned thoughts about baby, or other things like home invasion, or just having like, I really, really need to clean the house and I'm not going to feel better unless I do it. Sort of feeling that compulsion to clean and take care of things, and sort of being preoccupied with baby or with other things. And so I know it can take a lot of different forms, but rapid weight loss is definitely something that we need to pause and check in with people about. And because so much of, we get so many messages about what our bodies look like, instead of focusing on, it looks like maybe you've lost some weight, we can just say, hey, how do you feel like you're doing? How is your relationship with food right now? Because that's a very different question from great job, how'd you lose so much weight? Those are very, very different approaches. And one doesn't have a lot of expectations attached to it. I didn't know if you had any thoughts there, Christina.
No, I really appreciate your insight on postpartum psychosis, and just want to jump in and say, hey, we have Pregnancy and Postpartum Psychosis Awareness Day tomorrow. If you want any information, go to pppawareness.org, and there's events that you can sign up for. Just a quick plug there. Hope
And
everybody will join us.
And in terms of medications and weight gain and weight loss, it's not always that medications cause weight gain. But if we've lost weight because we've been really preoccupied with food, or we've been really anxious about maybe something that we're eating is going in our breast milk and we're worried it's upsetting baby's tummy, it's almost like the weight loss is a byproduct of anxiety. And so if we treat the anxiety, our body has a set point that it likes us to stay at, where it's comfortable, and it likes us to be around, within that weight range. And so once we correct the underlying problem of the anxiety or the low mood or the distressing thoughts about food, we'll come back up to that set point, is usually what they talk about in, there's a community called Health at Every Size that I feel like is a really great resource for healthcare providers, mental health providers, as well as like general people. Dr. Lindo Bacon wrote the original book of Health at Every Size, and it really talks about the science and the research about why dieting doesn't work and why dieting isn't good for you, and how instead focusing on, what your body can do and the more tangible signs of health, like your cholesterol and your blood sugar and those things, and getting joyful movement that isn't punitive or reactionary to something that we eat. Our body is not a strict equation. It's not, I put in a steak and I take care of the steak by going and doing 3 miles on the treadmill. Like that's not generally how bodies work overall, even though that's a lot of times how calories are portrayed in the media. And so it's just really interesting to work with people to understand, the things that they've learned that are incorrect and how to better take care of themselves. Because really that's what we want to model for our children is, I want to be kind to myself. I want you to be kind to yourself as you grow up. And I want you to be able to be happy with how you are, no matter what the number on a scale is. Are there any other questions or things that we might need to touch on, Christina? I feel like this has been a little bit brief, but I feel like we've touched on some good things.
Yeah, I think it's been really great and a wonderful overview of how we can, better feed ourselves in the either pregnancy or postpartum period, and really appreciate this presentation.
Absolutely. I want people to know that there are resources if they feel like they need more help with either food or exercise or body image related to pregnancy or postpartum. There are dietitians who focus on those time periods, either before having a baby or after. There are dietitians who are not diet focused, and a lot of them have advanced training in eating disorders to help challenge some of those chronic diet culture messages that we all got growing up. In the United States, at least, in a lot of parts of Europe and North America, about what a mom should look like and what a healthy person looks like, and how healthy and thin are not the same thing. And so learning to challenge those messages and the subtle ways that they can interact, or come out in social interactions is really important. The Health at Every Size is a great book to read. It's very, very thought-provoking, by Dr. Lindo Bacon. And there's a Health at Every Size community online, which is great for people to talk and learn and sort of expand how they view food and joyful movement, especially as there's so much focus on food in early parenting. There's also a lot of good meal planning resources that are free. You might laugh when I say this, but I had personally found a lot on Pinterest. And I feel like anytime as parents that we can save ourselves time, like we absolutely should do it. And so there's even apps that will like auto generate a meal idea, so that you're not even having to put in the thought, because I feel like so many parents, they just make decision after decision all day long, and it can be exhausting. And so anything that can help us do that planning, make those decisions without us having to do as much work is always really helpful. I always have patients who are like, I really want to come home and make a healthy dinner for my family after the day, but I'm just so tired and it just feels overwhelming. And so if it feels overwhelming in the moment, that means we needed to prepare it before, either the morning before and throw it in the crock pot, or the weekend before and like plan out the menu and order the groceries, or enlist more help from family members, because that is absolutely something that should not be all on one person. And I'm a big, big fan of delegation within the adults of the household, because we can't all do it ourselves. That's that superhero mom mentality that really gets us in trouble, is expecting us to be able to manage the whole household and raise the children and take care of ourselves and help our spouses. Like it's unrealistic. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by stuff, try to renegotiate who's helping with what, because feeding everybody is not one person's job.
Yes to that.
I really appreciate being able to come and share and talk about this that I'm so passionate about. I appreciate it, Christina.
Absolutely. We're so grateful for you coming and hanging out with us for a little bit and sharing your wonderful insight and knowledge. And I just thank you so much.
You are so welcome. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Anybody who needs any additional resources, I am on Instagram as Eucalyptus Healthcare, and I'm always happy to help point people in the right direction, even if you're not in the states where I practice, because I feel like sometimes it's hard to find the right care, but it makes all the difference when you do.
Awesome. Yes, it does. Thank you so much, Featherstone.
Thank you, Christina.
All right. Live stream is off.
Okay.
And oh, there we go.
Ooh, I felt like I whizzed through that.
You did great. It was great.
Okay.
And what I'll do is
I talk way too much, so I was trying to be succinct by only having 7 slides.
You did great. So it was a wonderful presentation. I will download the Facebook part and we'll put that on YouTube. So you'll be able to share it if you'd like to.
Great. I totally forgot I did this last slide. I thought that was my last slide, and I actually had written down these things that I wanted to share. Oh, how funny.
Always happens.
Yeah, right. I appreciate so much the opportunity to speak. I feel like it was a really good dry run because I'm presenting on eating disorders at the PSI conference this year.
Oh, awesome.
I'm a little bit nervous because it's not like patient focused and it's only my second time speaking. But I think it's going to be good.
You will do great. I'm upset. Well, I'm not terribly. I am upset. I can't go to the conference this year. It usually, yeah, it always falls on our vacation week as a family.
Oh,
So
no.
Next year I may have to speak up and be like, I'm going to have to move this around a little bit.
Yeah. Can we just do the next week, y'all?
Come on. But fun fact, you can't share this with anybody, but the hotline is launching tomorrow. In full launch. Yep.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. I'm excited that it's on Psychosis Awareness Day. I'm like, how appropriate. So.
I had really profound postpartum depression with my first, and then I had terrible anxiety with my second. And so I think I was really prepared for more depression, but I was like, I don't feel depressed. I just am having panic attacks all the time. I don't know what's going on. So I feel like it took me a while to even really fully recognize what was happening, just because it was so different from my first experience. Yeah. And I just can't imagine how different it would have been with my first baby if I'd even known that that was a thing.
Where were you in your like nurse practitioner journey with your kids?
So with my first son, I was an active duty police officer in the Army when I had him. That was the thing that pushed me to nursing. Because I was an EMT when I was younger. But I really saw myself more in that like high adrenaline EMS, crisis response environment. And I didn't think of myself as really being very medical. But I was really anxious about my first birth and I kind of wanted to do it at home. But my husband, who was also an EMT at the time, did not feel comfortable with that. And so had lovely midwives, but a very difficult birth, and walked away from it just like, oh my God, I could have done better than that. like people deserve to be treated better than that. Because a lot of the like nurses and other people in the hospital, like the pediatrician I interacted with, it was really uncomfortable being so young and feeling forced to like speak up for myself in an uncomfortable way, not being listened to, things that we hear about from a lot of moms in the OB environment. And so that was what pushed me to start on my nursing journey. When I had my second son, I was in my junior year of nursing school. And that was almost 10 years ago. So all of my education and pursuing that has been as a result of my births.
I think that's a common theme among practitioners that have, gone on to either be a therapist or whatever they're doing in the maternal health space, is they had their own lived experience. They want to make a change. And that is always so touching to me. So it's the same with me. Like I was a nurse, I am a nurse still, but I don't practice, at the bedside anymore. So
it's a rough time to be bedside nursing.
I've thought about several times just going to help, volunteering my time to go help, but like, no, I don't mind to change people's butts and give them a bath, but I will not take my own assignment.
It's really hard how nurses are being treated right now out in the hospitals. And I had friends who had started nursing school prior to COVID with the goal of becoming midwives and have now graduated and gotten into midwifery school. And it's just a different world. Yeah.
I mean, we're only an hour and a half from Vanderbilt, where that situation happened
What
Uh,
situation?
where the nurse got arrested and convicted.
Oh, the blame culture incident.
Yeah. And my husband is a pharmacy director in a hospital. So we haven't had a lot of conversations, but I'm just like, how? And like Tennessee is on the wrong side of history with that one. So,
Yeah.
sorry.
I hope it gets escalated up, because if we're going to go back to a blame culture, it's going to be really difficult for us to recruit more nurses.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It probably already is. Unless
Yeah.
we make a change and try to protect nurses more,
Yeah.
because they've never, I don't think we've ever had a true protection in regards to safe ratios, patient combativeness, all the things. So,
When I was working in psychedelic medicine, I'll never forget one of our first patients who came in with like treatment resistant depression was a nurse who had been brutalized in the ER where she worked by like multiple patients. It wasn't just one like chronic frequent flyer. It was like she had been brutally attacked by a couple patients, and a lot of them, you know, had substance use as a part of the picture. And it was just a higher acuity ER because of the homelessness population, lots of serious mental illness that was not being managed well, in an area without a lot of resources. So a part of it was environmental and a part of it was just bad luck and wrong place, wrong time. But it really, really impacted her. And I felt really grateful that I ended up working in the kind of nursing that I did, because I never wanted, like, it was funny. Everyone was like, oh, you're going to be a nurse now. So you're going to be an ER nurse because you were a cop and an EMT. And I'm like, oh God, I don't want to be in the ER ever.
yeah,
I feel like it's such a different culture,
yeah, for sure.
the
It
thick
for sure
skin
is.
that they have to develop to survive in that environment.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah, I can't imagine. Can't imagine for sure. So difficult.
Have you ever considered doing like a round table or fireside chat of people who came to maternal mental health from their own experiences? Because I feel like, um, you know, the only person I know who really talks about those experiences in depth, and she only does it one-on-one, is Jennifer Silliman of Dark Side of the Full Moon.
Yeah. That we should talk about hosting that and doing it. I think that would be incredible, because I think that's the majority of specialists, is they get into this because of their own lived experience and what happened to them.
I feel like, you know, sometimes the universe moves in funny ways and sometimes it just seems a little cruel. There's a midwife that I had worked with a lot when I was still trying to be a midwife. And she'd never been married, never had any kids, never been pregnant. But she was so good with moms with mental health issues. And we had been in discussions of her joining me at Eucalyptus, and expanding like the number of states that we serve, because midwives and nurse practitioners have different levels of autonomy here in Virginia.
Mhm.
And then it just so happened that her and her partner decided they wanted to try to get pregnant. She's in a psych NP program. And then she has like 3 miscarriages back to back. And I'm over here like hurting for her, because I've known her for years and she's so sweet and she's going to be a great mom and she's an incredible midwife and just a lovely human being. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, here's the experience that's going to make you absolutely incredible, because you're going to know what it's like.
Yeah.
Which is sad, but also like, it's true. So many of us are good at what we do because of what we went through.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So is she still trying to get pregnant?
Last I heard, she is I think somewhere in the past week or so, she had her first appointment with a reproductive endocrinologist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mm.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting that, you know, I wonder how long she's been trying to get pregnant, and now she's just going to a reproductive endocrinologist.
Well, she and her partner just started trying, I want to say like mid last year. They're not having issues with conceiving. It's just that like between 5 and 10 weeks, they're losing it.
Wow.
And so I think that's the thing, is that hope comes so quickly because the pregnancy achievement was easy, but there's got to be some issue with like progesterone or genes,
Yeah.
or and we don't always get an answer as to why it happens. But she's 37, so I don't think that like she wants to wait any longer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I will definitely think of her, and hopefully they will get their rainbow baby soon.
I think they will. I think she is one of those determined people that if there's a way, she's going to make it happen.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you keeping her in your thoughts. She's a wonderful midwife that's helped so many people have really lovely births and healthy babies, and she deserves a baby of her own.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I learned a lot because we had to go to a reproductive endocrinologist for our first, and just seeing what all we had to go through, and that was very minimal. I don't think it's just not talked about enough, and people aren't educated enough of what you may need, even with progesterone, and how helpful that can be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But even progesterone, it has side effects. You don't take it and not feel it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And I feel like reproductive endocrinologists are not always the warmest, fuzziest people. Like they're experts, but they're not always, like my experience has been that it's very hit or miss whether or not they're genuinely kind people and take time to explain. And so when people are given medications and it's supposed to be the cure, but then it makes them feel bad along the way, like it's a lot of complicated emotions on top of infertility.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's almost like you can not kind of understand, but not understand how they can be the way they are, I guess.
I think it's because it's their day to day. You and
Yeah.
I both know that, like for nurses, oh yeah, of course I'm going to make you, deep breathe and cough, and we're going to turn you over every 30 minutes or whatever, like because it's what we do every day. But for people who come in the hospital, it might be their first or only time they've ever been in the hospital. Nothing about this is familiar. And so it's like a perspective gap. Like from our perspective as the provider or the nurse, like this is every day. This is how we always do it. And for the person in the chair or on the exam table, they've never been here. This is all foreign.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings me to another fireside chat that needs to happen at some point, is all the helping professionals that go through really bad experiences and how they perceive that, and how it impacts them. 'Cause I've met a lot of nurses that have gone through psychosis.
I'm so here
and
for
really,
that fireside chat.
yeah, I really feel like it's a discriminating factor that's not really talked about very often. Like we should know this and we should know that, and we're not educated because we're in healthcare. So that's another one.
I feel like psychosis is a whole, like, yeah, because I've only been in business with Eucalyptus Health a little bit over a year, and I've had one patient with postpartum psychosis, and it very much was just like I was talking about, like it really looked like anxiety, and we started an SSRI, and she was like, man, I feel like I'm able to accomplish so much more. And I was like, let's keep a close eye on you. Like, I'm not sure if we're doing better or worse. Like you seem to think you're doing better. I'm not convinced. And then a couple days later, I got a phone call from her and she was not herself anymore. Just incredibly disorganized, confused. The way she was talking didn't make sense. And thankfully her husband was there, and I was able to convince him that this was not just sleep deprivation, that she needed care right now.
Yeah.
But for a 22-year-old newly married guy, that was not on his radar. That was not something that he was expecting. And he was so resistant at first. He was like, can I just give her a Benadryl and make her sleep? She'll feel better if she sleeps. And I was like, I know that this feels awful and terrifying, and you want it to be better with sleep, but Benadryl is not going to fix this.
No.
And
No.
so I mean, we talk about how rare it is, but it happens because of how many people are having babies. Even a rare thing, it happens.
Oh yeah. Teresa Toomey has taught me a lot about how, that rare is relative. So I'm really trying to change my terminology around that, because
Rare is relative.
it's not as rare as we think it is, especially in these times. I think the incidence has gone up, but she told me that it's as rare as Down syndrome. And, we all know about Down syndrome and are aware of it, but not psychosis. So very interesting.
Keep me updated about your fireside chats. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's been great to chat with you.
Absolutely. I hope that your group on Facebook is busy and getting to touch the moms that need it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's quiet, but I feel like everyone benefits from the information shared in there.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to finally meet you.
Yes, you too. I hope to meet you in person one day.
Yeah, maybe Tennessee isn't that far. There's got to be some kind of conference that happens out there at some point, or if you end up coming to Mom Congress in person ever. It's only like 2.5 hours from my house, so
Awesome.
DC is not far. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a great day, and thank you so much again.
You too. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.